Some people may have some influence on the story of the future along with me in the studio now. Ahsan, Patricia and Estefania, I hope I got all your names right. Welcome to this session, and we've decided to use the opportunity of you guys being in London for the Foundation's Linear to Circular workshop, which I'm going to ask you to tell our viewers a little bit about in a moment, to get you in here to find out a bit about your experiences and especially what you've been doing over the last few days. So maybe some of you, actually what I would want to do is actually just 10 seconds, I want to know where you're from and what you're doing right now, whether that's studying or working on certain projects, just so the audience knows a little bit about you. So maybe if we go from Ahsan down the line, 10 seconds, where you're from and what's your story?
So I'm a Canadian native, currently studying environmental policy master's degree at the London School of Economics, doing my dissertation on plastics.
Great.
I'm Patricia. I'm from Spain and England, but grew up all over, and I'm the director of the board for the Circular Economy Club, and I currently work at Capgemini at the moment.
And Circular Economy Club is a group that brings, for anyone who doesn't know, brings together circular economy professionals around events and things like that.
Anyone really that's interested in the circular economy, whether it's from academia or just wants to get some knowledge, or from the private sector for government. It's just a platform for everyone to connect.
Great. And Estefania?
Yeah, I'm from Ecuador, and I'm studying a master's degree in management in polymer technologies. I'm a polymer materials engineer, so I'm based in Austria right now.
So we've got some materials experts in the room. So Ahsan, Linear to Circular workshop, what was that and what have you been doing the last couple of days?
So the Ellen MacArthur Foundation opened up Emerging Leaders Development Program for young professionals and students. And so from all over the world, a call out went out and brought us together for a week full of workshops around circular economy principles, development practices. Lots of really interesting people came in and delivered presentations. And then we got to spend a full day at the summit yesterday, which was a really amazing experience.
What sort of things have you been doing, Patricia, when we say, people doing presentations, workshops? Can you give us some tangible examples of the types of things that you've been engaging with?
Yeah, sure. So we were kind of given the opportunity to have such a huge range of different aspects of it. One of the examples that I personally found quite interesting was the Materium, and having them come in and physically making bioplastics, which I would have never had that opportunity. Also, IDEO came in and showed us how to actually make like a framework with our projects that we're tasked to do and how to think of a solution for it. There was just such a range of speakers and interactions, and I think something that was really important was the fact that we were also able to contribute to the program and what we wanted to learn. So it came from all angles, really.
So it's quite a practical thing. I mean, sounds like, I assume making bioplastics involves some real work of some kind. What do you do? You're burning stuff, or how do you make bioplastics?
So the way that they described it was kind of like cooking.
Yes.
So they brought these kind of
But it's also
portable
not like cooking.
Well, no, you don't eat it. But they showed us this website where you can get they call it recipes, and you just kind of add in the different quantities and you boil it, and you then put it onto like a cellophane plastic, which is either dried out or dehydrated. So.
And Estefania, obviously this was a program that had people from all around the world involved. What's the value of, for someone like you who's obviously got a real interest in a specific part of the circular economy, maybe more broadly, to be able to connect with, I think there were 40 different individuals in this space for 3 days?
Yeah, this was an amazing opportunity. I mean, I'm based in Austria, so I get the chance to meet people from different nationalities. But the fact that we're here all engaged with one common topic, so we bring in people from engineers or science or policy, and all these kind of different topics getting together and how to apply it and how to bring it to our own countries, basically, because we were some people from Mexico and from India and from Ecuador myself. So it's like, how can we apply the circular economy back in our own countries? So we got to learn a lot from the countries who are actually doing more, let's say.
Yeah. Why? What motivates? What was the motivating factor for you in terms of why you thought I'm gonna apply to be a part of this program? I understand it has other elements to it. It's not just the 3 days, but there's some pre-collaboration and content, and maybe even something afterwards. But what's the key motivating factor for you to sign up?
I think there are two key motivations. First is about the plastics. There's such a big discussion about the plastics and packaging, but not only that. So this is my major. I'm a polymer materials engineer, so it makes sense. But also about Ecuador, an emerging economy, and South America. Basically, we have so many natural resources that they are not really being exploited. So how can we do this? How we can use these resources to make something better, something good?
And Patricia, you're obviously deeply engaged with circular economy as a topic, given your current role. What inspired you about the idea? What motivates you to be so involved in it in the way that you are?
I think for me, it's just an idea that makes sense, and I think it's something that brings together lots of different stakeholders, where a lot of different stakeholders can also gain an advantage from it. And I think it was one of the few concepts that I kind of came across during my master's that I was like, this could actually really work and this is really needed. And I think the interesting part of it is having so many different backgrounds. So for example, here we all have different backgrounds, and having it from so many different perspectives and from different nationalities. And I think it's something almost that's quite beautiful for everyone to come together and actually work on this issue that's so needed at the moment, because as everyone is aware of in this room, it's not going to go on the way it is at the moment. So it's really interesting to see different perspectives on that.
Ahsan, we've had a question in from online. So this is probably the trickiest question we've had so far, but you look like you can handle it. They say it's one thing to explore the idea of a circular economy in a program like this. It's fun to have 3 days of workshops and talks and really engage with the idea collectively. It's another to take that idea and convince others, perhaps in a workplace or in your studies. But is that something that how would you approach that, or what? Do you now see yourself as sort of an advocate for the idea?
Yeah, for sure. And one thing that really came out of this the last couple of days is how diverse circular economy concepts are, and how they can interject all sorts of different parts of the economy and industries. So we talked about circular economy, building design, plastics, food, textiles, right? So the idea behind circular economy, the stress being on the economy side, is there's components of circularity that can be brought into every sector, everything that we do within the current marketplace. And it's just a better way of doing things, right? So if there's profitability and resource efficiency gains, there's less waste that we can all do without. And it's something where you're working within the system to change it and make it more efficient. So I think it's an easier sell than a lot of other environmental principles like climate change, because there's a lot of politicization that happens, but circular economy is kind of this budding new space where you're working with the system and making it better. And I think there's way more promising components of it that can be directly applied.
Yeah, I think that's, obviously we've just had Joaquin and John on the sofa, and it strikes me that, I haven't spent a huge amount of time with you guys, but it strikes me that there's a kind of energy out of the circular economy as a kind of a solution or a direction that you don't necessarily get when you talk about the challenges of, coral reefs being killed off by the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. And that's very inspiring. Are there any, I suppose the follow-up question to that is, maybe I could start with you on that, Estefania, is are there any challenges? What's the biggest challenge in terms of, for you, in terms of how you're going to take forward the circular economy, whether it's in your research or what you do after that?
Mm-hmm. So, as I said, there are two parts of the circular economy interested for me, one's for the industry and another one as an emerging economy. So the challenge would be, how do I really bring this concept to my country? It's basically unexplored, so it's such many things that could be improved, or how to convince the people who say, hey, we can change this in this way and it will be good for you, to add economical value, but also in the environmental side of things. So that would be the main challenge, I would say.
And Patricia, maybe a similar question to you. Obviously, Circular Economy Club brings together lots of different people to talk about that. What do you find most difficult about the sort of pushing the idea out there?
Yeah, so I think it echoes a lot of what was just said. I think there's two areas of this. One is getting buy-in from stakeholders, whether it's from government or from a business point of view, just kind of getting them to understand what it is and explaining it in a language that is understandable. But I think on that point, it's how do we make sure that we're creating the right narratives that we want for the circular economy. In the workshops, we did discuss a lot of what actually could go wrong and what areas could maybe be more challenging. And I think being able to explore that at the workshops actually enables us to overcome those. So I think the narrative and getting buy-in for me at the moment, I think, are the two biggest challenges.
We had Ahsan, we had a great, I know you really enjoyed this particular session we had yesterday as part of the Foundation's Summit 2019 with Wolfgang Blau, who's head of Condé Nast International. It was a session about what was the role of media in this story, and he talked a lot about stories. Just picking up a little bit on Patricia's point around narrative, how important does it feel like to get that story right to inspire the right kinds of actions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Wolfgang was great because he talked about how the role of media is to simplify the messages so that it could be portrayed to the average person. So, in terms of narrative, it's about conveying to people that jobs can be created with this, that things can be cheaper, that they could still have their cake and eat it too, in a sense, that you can continue to buy things and live well, but do so in a very responsible and sustainable way that doesn't degrade the planet or destroy the resources that we've got.
I suppose actually in many ways the easy to understand convey thing, yes, it's good for communicating for the average person, but I'm not an average person and I still like stuff to be as clear to me as possible to engage with it. We had a question in online from Andrea, and I think it could be a question any of you guys could pick up on, but what surprised you most when you started to learn about the circular economy? Anyone particularly want to jump in on that one? Go on, Patricia. Yeah. What surprised you most?
Sure. Firstly, I think what surprised me was how have I not heard about this before?
How recently did you hear about it?
So I learned about it during my master's, which was in 2015 and 2016, so relatively new. Ago, yeah. But since then, the conversation has definitely spiked. But yeah, I think that really surprised me. And I think what surprised me was that it was just, how can I put this, that it was just so intertwined. You start off thinking, okay, yeah, that, we can just put it back in the system. It doesn't sound as maybe difficult as it is. And then you go deeper and deeper and deeper, and you just are blown away with how many complexities, how the whole system really needs to change rather than just a product or a business model. It's really grasping the whole economy. And I think for me, that was one of the most surprising things and the most interesting, to be honest.
And what's next for you, Estefania? I mean, it was obviously, I know that the Linear to Circular program had a pre-work component to it. Actually, can you tell us a little bit about, I realise I've mentioned that a couple of times and I haven't actually made that at all clear to anyone watching this. Tell us just, so there's the workshop we've had this week, and there's a piece of work that you guys did before that workshop.
Yeah, so we have 6 weeks of collaborative work. We got together in teams, and we all have different topics. So one of the topics was for food, and my topic with my team, we were talking about a cosmetics company, so giving a solution for them on how to become more circular. So for the past 6 weeks, basically, we just got to talk to each other online and came up with a bunch of ideas on how we can implement this, not only on the packaging, there was a big focus on packaging, but also different way how we entice this business to tell them, hey, this is the way to go, it will be good for you. So we did that. Mm-hmm.
Right, and maybe a question for you, Ahsan, because we've had another one in at Renard. It seems like the topic of how do you communicate the circular economy, how do you become an advocate for it is very popular with our audience. His question is, and I think I'm giving you quite a lot of the tough questions, is the concept too complex? And is that a barrier to adopting the circular economy?
Well, I guess the complexity, every challenge within the environmental sphere is complex because ecologically everything's interconnected. And that was also one of the things that came up over the course of the workshop is how do you build an inclusive circular economy future that doesn't leave anyone behind, and it's a very common thread. So technically, yes, it is complex. How do you create products and services that can be regenerated and turned into something? But these are big problems, and we've got big thinkers and big brains in the room and in the world. So we're continuously developing new solutions, and it's about getting people excited about those solutions, getting them on board, and continuing that process of innovation and development. A couple of decades ago, people couldn't think that you could economically generate solar energy, and that was a really complex challenge. But now it's on grid parity with a lot of fossil fuel production. So
that's great. In a moment, I'm going to ask you guys because obviously you guys have had the benefit of the last few days and of the program that preceded it, to give me the one thing that you've taken away that could be valuable for anyone watching this. I want to give you a second just to think about that. But I just want to tell the audience that after this session at 1:30, we've got Bringing the Circular Economy to Life in Cities, and we've got a representative from Sao Paulo and a representative from London talking about how things are actually being applied across two of the world's largest cities in the circular economy. Both of those cities are very forward-thinking, and they're both part of the Foundation's recently launched food initiative. So that's something to look forward to at 1:30. But back to the guys. So maybe starting with you, Patricia, the one thing that you've maybe taken away from the last few days or the program that preceded it that you think is a powerful reflection that anyone watching this might benefit from?
Well, I think one of the most important things is just to be open-minded. I think a lot of us really knew what the concept was and had our standpoint on it, but I think by being able to listen to the same issues or the same ideas from a different perspective really makes you understand it just so much deeper. And I think I would just advise everyone just to, it's good to have opinions and to understand where you're coming from, but it's also really important to listen to other ones to feed into your conversation. So I think that's, I guess, for circular economy and for anything really. So that's what my takeaway is. I don't know if
you're understanding the idea, but be open-minded to converse with other people who are engaged with it.
I think it's great to have conflicting conversations as long as it's in a safe space and it's not in a way that's going to harm anyone, but just to understand and to really fuel your ideas and your observations.
And Estefania, anything on the polymer front that has radically changed your perspective?
Well, I think I'm actually on the right path because I entered the polymer field thinking about sustainable development, and when I listened about circular economy, it made sense for me. So the thing that I would add extra would say it would be that this concerns everyone. The discussion about circular economy and sustainable development. It doesn't matter if you're a teacher or if you're a student or if you own a restaurant or you're an engineer. This concerns absolutely everyone, and how can you add value and how can you make things better in basically your society and everything.
So a powerful sort of confirmation moment for you in terms of where you're pushing forward.
Yeah.
And I guess that echoes a little bit Ahsan's point earlier about the applicability to it across so many different areas, sectors, contexts. Ahsan, again, toughest to go last. One thing that you think you've taken away from this experience?
Yeah, so it was the Materium workshop that really drove home this fact that there's no such thing as waste. That I used to think that any organic material, you just turn it into fertilizer or compost, and that's the best thing you could do. But these guys at Materium, they're turning coffee grinds into cups, they're turning orange peels into makeup. So it just goes to show that as long as you can maintain the integrity of waste and maintain those nutrients within those forms, there's ways for you to upcycle and recycle a lot of the stuff that you think would be garbage and useless.